utmost commitment, that's the way it's always been. We rise up to the challenge, we give the game our all. With sheer determination, we go in for the ball. With the crowd thunders, go Cats!
Hi everybody, welcome to the BigFooty Cats podcast. My name is Willo. We are up to, I think, episode 6 for season 2016. Joined by a couple of special guests tonight, making his podcast debut tonight. We've got Pivo. Welcome, Pivo.
Parky, thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to have you. We've tried to have you on the show a couple of times before and it hasn't quite worked out, so it's good that it's actually happened.
You haven't been able to meet my pay.
No, we haven't been able to meet your demands just yet. Also, we've got joining us from the other side of the world, who has subjected him to another day of pain, our tomorrow, by getting up in the middle of the night. Daz, welcome back, Daz.
Good morning, everyone. It's, very early here. It's all going well.
It's a lot closer to the time you should be getting up, though, than it was when we first actually started this phone call.
Well, yeah, an hour and a half ago. That's all right.
It's that stupid o'clock.
This is the commitment Correct. We've had, people. We've had a very, very thorough pre-show production meeting.
I really hope it shows through.
And we've
You've
also
set the bar way too high there.
We've set the bar too high, and we've got a lot of outtakes ready for the Black Label edition that'll be released at the end of the year. Now,
that one you could, Willow. That one I think you could make money on.
Oh, look, I'm happy. If anyone knows a sponsor, will send me a PM and we'll talk turkey. Now, on to the serious stuff, the reason we're actually doing this. We have a game of football to look forward to this weekend, and we didn't have that last weekend. But first, we're going to look back a bit and briefly touch on our last game, which was an incredibly annoying, frustrating, disappointing, all of the above loss to the Saints. I don't even know the exact margin. Was it 3 points?
Yeah, 3 points, I think.
Yeah. With Jack Stephen snatching a goal off the ground late to put them in front. We will just briefly touch on that because everyone's probably doesn't really want to look that far back over the last couple of weeks, and especially to look at a loss. So, Pivo, just briefly, what were your thoughts or your take from the game? And basically the way it all unfolded.
Do you want the serious answer, or do you want just the knee-jerk action? It was shit house, and I threw things at TVs and.
Well, that was a standard response, but then I suppose if we can delve a bit deeper into it.
Yeah, no, look, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was a pretty disappointing loss, and it was pretty baffling as well. I don't think anyone sort of went in there and expected it to be a loss. I know I might be sort of selling St Kilda a bit short there, but I reckon most of us probably expected to get up for this one. And the fact that we once again somehow found a way to get ourselves behind early and had to try and reel them back in, similar to, I guess, the Blues and the Pies. And I think, even though I didn't see it, GWS was a bit like that as well, wasn't it? GWS got out. Sort of, we had to try and reel them back in.
Yeah. We probably started a bit better against GWS than
we did against St Kilda.
Than we did against St Kilda. We just didn't capitalise. But yeah, the pattern for the losses is the same. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a trend. It's. Look, there's probably been a bit of discussion about whether it's attitudinal or whether there's the clubs are coming better prepared or something like that. I probably fall into the attitude a little bit. We've got a pretty good record against the top 8, teams that we played, and yet we've managed to lose to teams that we don't expect to lose. And this is all stuff that's obviously been discussed ad nauseum, both on the board and in the papers. But I mean, what can you say when you let a team jump out that you're not expecting to? And then we watched the Saints last week against, was it Gold Coast?
Yep.
Who hadn't exactly been playing that well this year themselves, and they did a bit of a number on the Saints. So, attitude, I think, for me. I don't know what you guys think, but it's not. There's definitely a trend there. We just seem to be a bit of slip early on in the first half, and maybe we just don't quite have the polish at the moment to reel them in. Even though we did hit the front against the Saints, so
it's a It's I think it just adds to the frustration when you look at the teams we've beaten and the teams we've lost to. So it has to be something to do with the attitude, because I can't see how you can come out and play the consistently good footy we have against the good teams and then just not do it at all against the poor teams. And I've seen other theories about that the poorer teams don't set up as how is it described? They don't set up as predictably, and they're a bit erratic and different, and it's harder to counter and stuff. But I don't know if I agree with it that much, because if that was the case, then it was that much harder. Wouldn't they be beating better teams more often? Like, why is it just us?
You'd think so.
So yeah, that's my take on it. It's frustrating. I'm hoping that it's just attitude, and that it's out of them after another loss. But
any time you have, was it Darren Minchington kicking 3? From St Kilda.
He did that to us last year as well, didn't he?
That was exactly going to be my point. Yeah, thanks for crashing on that.
No
worries. But yeah, two games in a row, and somebody that is a good little player, but I haven't seen a lot of him. But all of a sudden pops up and kicks 3 or 4 goals, and you're like, why are we making him look like a superstar? But then you go back to the Carlton game, we made Andreas Everett look like Lance Franklin, because he kicked 5, I think. And it's like, well, what's going on?
We've got this habit.
Yeah, Armfield was another one who got amongst it as well. So
yeah, we've got the habit of just making shit trucks just look glorious when they play us.
And it's like that's got to come back to either a work rate or an effort or an attitude or something like that. And then once they switched on, then you're playing catch up and you burn your tickets trying to get back.
Mm.
But on the same. I was just going to say, on the opposite side of that, you look at it, if you'd said to me at the start of the year, going into the bye, we'd be 10-4 and then be 6-1 or wherever it is against top 8 sides, getting to that point, I'd have taken that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that there was a point made that from the last 4 games we've played, where we've had wins against North, the Dogs, GWS and Ulster St Kilda, if you'd asked us, all would have taken 3-1 if offered that at the start. And if they'd said, I think, what was it? Someone said, if we said beat North, you lose to the Doggies by 3 goals, you beat GWS and beat St Kilda by 50 points, everyone would take it and are happy. But just the way it's gone the other way, people aren't happy, and all these different questions get asked and raised.
And I think this is the reason why there's perhaps a little bit of angst on the board, and just question marks in general over us, because to perform so well against such good opposition, but then to drop the games that we've dropped, people were sort of saying, is there maybe a bit of a soft belly to Geelong, and is there a way to get under a little bit right from the get-go? The Pies all a level of intensity that's a bit more what they bring to our team threes, and we always seem to struggle with it. The games we've lost against the Pies, a lot of people have come away going, they're ferocious, and they were right in there in their own offices, and they didn't give a sense that there could have inferred pressure. We didn't really seem to handle that too well. And, against Saints, it was a bit the same. Saints were switched on straight from the get-go and, really were cracking, and, but then when they were getting the ball, they seemed to guys that were already in motion and sort of pumping the ball forward. And we're 4-5 goals down and having to come back into it. And when you're that far behind, you've got no margin for error. Half the game's gone, and if your team is down, you're punching the ball forward to get it in 2 goals, but you turn it over, they go back the other way and kick a goal. There's all that effort's sort of almost been wiped out, and you can see guys kind of like drop their heads a little bit and think, shit, what do we have to do to sort of get over that hump a little bit?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hate losing. But I think the competition is a lot closer too. It's if you're 2 and you're playing 12 these days, 12th is only maybe 8% or 10% outside of being a really good team. And if you roll in and you give them a head start or you give them a sniff, and exactly like you said, Pivo, they start running forward, they start getting forward to the ball, they start breaking to the outside, a little bit earlier or with a little more confidence, and all of a sudden a couple of things come off and it just snowballs. And with teams being closer, I think, overall, you get situations where that happens, and all of a sudden, like you said, you're 3 or 4 goals down, and what do you mean we're 3 or 4 goals down? We're supposed to be winning this game. And then you've got to switch on to try and catch up, and it's just harder to do. It's not a good excuse, but it happens.
Yeah, but it's a common sense as well, and it's the same in any level of footy that if any of us have played anywhere, that if you don't come out switched on at the start, the team that you're expecting to beat sort of sticks with you. The longer they stick with you, the more confidence they get, and the more they sort of grow, and the harder they make it, the harder it becomes for you to shake them, and the longer they sort of hang tough, the more chance they give themselves. Their confidence grows. It just all snowballs.
Yep.
I'm just not sure if the pattern from them doing it, why teams are doing it to us so well this year, is the frustrating part.
I've got a bit of a theory that while I've come up with it, I'm not sure I actually subscribe to it, but obviously I think it's more attitudinal. But I was just sort of thinking back on it, where when you're a top 8 side, you tend to focus more on yourself a little bit, and sort of what you control, what you do well, what your plans are and what your structures are and so forth. And I'm just wondering whether, a St Kilda, which is more of an up-and-coming sort of side, Carlton, who are, an up-and-coming side, the Pies, probably a little bit the same boat, whether they have the luxury of concentrating more on what we do opposed to what they do themselves, and they sit there and think, okay, well, we reckon like this, let's implement that at the expense of what we do, and if we can turn it and get on early. I mean, the game against Collingwood was lost in effectively 10 minutes of the first quarter, just from the way that they were really sort of crashing in, and it was like all they were doing was really sort of forcing the ball forward. There wasn't a huge amount of, it's probably a bit of a disservice to say that there wasn't a huge amount of structure and so forth behind it, but the intent was just to try and just move the ball their way as best they could. And were they doing it because they thought, well, this is how we can try and beat Geelong, as opposed to other top 8 sides that are trying to go, well, this is how we play, and maybe we counter the top 8 sides a bit better because of that, versus a bottom 8 side that can just afford to say, this game we're just concentrating on trying to shut them down and taking them out of the game. I mean, Seb Ross's job on Dangerfield was pretty good when you sort of look at it as a one-on-one, head-to-head type battle. I mean, do I think that that's probably the case? No, but maybe there might be something there.
Mm.
Oh, is that me? Okay.
Hey, no, that's all right, mate. Don't.
No, that's cool.
No, that's all right. Have some think time.
No, clip out any silences anyway, so it's all right, mate.
Right. Sure you will. it's probably the best explanation for us not playing well that I've heard in a long time.
Yep.
I mean, we just and credit to St Kilda. I don't want to make it sound like St Kilda just rolled up and did what they wanted. They pantsed us, and credit to them. But we've got to make sure that just does not happen again. And hopefully this week we'll see an example of being switched on from at the very start.
Yep, and that's a good point, Daz, that I was just about to make. We need to look forward now to this week. We play the Swans, who are up in the top 4, I think, aren't they? 3rd, 4th-ish?
Yeah, they're up there.
I should have probably checked this before we came on, but we're playing the Swans at home tomorrow, 7:50. Or by the time I get this uploaded, it'll probably be tonight. So we have the luxury of doing this on a Thursday. We have the luxury of the teams having been announced, so we can actually discuss what is actually the actual changes and what's actually happening instead of just speculating on it all. So, ins for Geelong. Darcy Lang returns after 2 games in the VFL, I think. And then a couple of big ins. Nakia Cockatoo has been named to play based on
BigFooty's
half 2 weeks ago. BigFooty's own, that's it. BigFooty's own Nakia Cockatoo has been named after a half in the 2s a couple of weeks ago. And what hopefully turns out to be a feel-good story, Mitch Clark was making his long-awaited comeback after, well, when did he go down? About round 9, I think, from memory, last year.
Sounds about right,
He's
yeah.
had 4 games in the 2s and has performed pretty well in all of them. I think the conditions didn't suit him that well, the last one, but he's been very good before that. So he has earned his chance and gets a chance under the lights tomorrow night. The outs, Corey Gregson, which is probably to be expected with Lang or Cockatoo in, I would have thought. But then a couple of interesting changes or omissions in Reece Stanley and Shane Kirsten. Now, Daz, we've noticed that you do have a bit of a fondness for Shane Kirsten.
Goes all right.
How have you taken the news that he's dropped, and what are your thoughts basically on the changes as a whole?
Well, I'll deal with Kirsten quickly. Hasn't been playing well enough, basically. So he needs to, like Lang, had to go back to the VFL and polish up some things. I have no doubt that that's what the message to Kirsten is, and whether he does it or not is up to him. But it'll be interesting to see how he responds to that. Unhappy people. But as long as we get the results, it doesn't matter who's out there. If you're not performing, given chances, you got to go back. So it makes perfect sense to me. I'm surprised a little bit with Stanley, in that who's going to be doing the ruck work in conjunction with Zach Smith. That'll be interesting to see whether Clark actually gets to play some of that, or are they going to roll Blitz into it? Gregson, again with Lang coming in, or with Cockatoo coming in, not necessarily too much of a shock there. Although with Cocky, I'm surprised, and I posted this, that after a half of footy that was the second half game, a little surprised that they've gone straight in, but again, they know more about his performance and have a lot more information at their fingertips than I do. So I guess we'll see how it works out.
Pivo.
To use a well-worn big footy trope, he must be rated internally.
Gold.
Pivo, what are your thoughts on the changes?
Look, I was a bit disappointed that you didn't include as one of the big ins as a card-carrying member of the Darcy Lang fan club. But,
I don't mean to undersell him at all. But
Nah.
Look, I'm pretty happy with Clark, Lang and Cockatoo coming in. As you said, Kirsten and Stanley, as 2 of the outs, were definitely interesting. When I saw it, I definitely raised the eyebrows a bit. I thought it was going to be between one or the other. So for both of them to go out, I sort of wonder whether it smacks of a late change, potentially. But we love that conspiracy theory as well. So look, it's hard to say. I mean, I guess they think Clark probably can hold up and sort of back Smith up in the ruck.
The Swans are sort of down a ruckman though at the moment because Tippett had been playing.
Tippett's out. Yeah.
Tippett had been playing as their number one ruckman,
but didn't they drop Curvis?
Yeah,
Nankervis is out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe paralleling them a little bit. I'm not sure.
I can touch on the Swans. The Swans changes while we're at it. They've got Teddy Richards in, Alia in, who he's a tall defender, isn't he? So they've brought in 2 tall defenders, and Papley and Naismith in and out. Jeremy Laidler, Nankervis, Benny McGlynn's been dropped, and Isaac Heaney is being managed.
I really lost in Heaney.
I really rate Heaney, so I'm pretty okay with him not being there.
Absolutely,
I reckon he's a jet. So
I think Nace can run through the ruck, so maybe they've just replaced Stan Curvis with Naismith in that regard.
They do
Heaney,
have Callum Sinclair as well that they picked up from the Eagles last year, who obviously rough for him.
Yeah, Heaney obviously being out is handy. I mean, that kid obviously can play. Ben McGlynn, I must admit I haven't really watched much of the Swans. Seeing McGlynn omitted was a bit strange, but then maybe he's been playing shithouse and I just haven't been paying attention. So, but obviously Ted Rich is coming back's pretty good in for them as well. So, and Papley's been playing all right, hasn't he? I haven't seen much of the lines.
Sorry, I haven't seen much of the VFL. Has Clark been doing much ruck work in the VFL in the 4 games he's had?
He's done a little bit,
but not a 50-50 kind of thing.
I wouldn't think a 50-50 thing, but
more 70-30 some surely.
I wouldn't be surprised to see sort of Smith take the lion's share of it. Clark maybe pinch hit for a bounce a quarter, and he'll probably take the forward line stuff,
sure.
and Blitzar's potentially rolling through as well. But Smith's best game this year, in my opinion, was against GWS in Geelong, where Stanley didn't play, and I was pretty concerned going into that game about Mummy, basically after what he'd done to us the first time. And Smith was outstanding that game. So, for all we know, he could be one of the types that responds well to being number one and sort of having to do the bulk of it himself as well.
Well, I guess we're going to find out this week.
Yeah, and Sydney's just just my 2 cents worth on the changes before I go on. I wonder if it potentially is a bit weather related. Maybe as well. I obviously live in Geelong, and we've had heavy rain the last 3 days, non-stop heavy rain. So I don't think it's meant to rain tomorrow, but it's still going to be heavy ground. There'll be moisture in the ground still. It'll be slippery. There'll be bodies crashing and bashing everywhere, and I am wondering if Clark they've taken and they've put 2 really zippy but players that are hard as well in Lang and Cocky that can still crash and bash, and they'll throw themselves in, but they're also pretty fleet of foot. I'm wondering if that's to balance out the Clark in, and that's why they've also dropped one of the other. They've dropped 2 bigger blokes, but that was my initial feeling, but I'm also fully aware of the fact that Stanley and Kirsten move pretty well for the sizes that they are. So that was just my speculation. Or that's what I was wondering, basically. As you said, Pivo, maybe there's potentially it smacks of a late change, and it looks like the Swans, with Aaliyah and Richards coming in, have picked a team to defend. I think they were assuming
we'd be a bit taller, maybe.
We'd be a bit taller, but Laidlers, they've brought in 2 key tall defenders and dropped 1 tall defender. So they thought that we would have Hawkins, Clark and Stanley or Kirsten. And so they brought in the bigger boys. So I wouldn't be surprised potentially to see a late change from their end either.
Yeah,
possible.
I mean, Towers is tallish, isn't he, as well?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, could be wrong.
So what do you see us having to do to beat them? Whoever wants to go first.
Just they've
kick
got
straight.
kick straight, and they've got to come out straight away and be switched on. You can't give them a sniff. Cannot give them a sniff. That doesn't mean you have to come out and kick 12 goals in the first quarter or anything, but you've just got to be on the game.
To beat Sydney, you've got to win the ball at the coalface as well.
Right.
I reckon they love the contested footy, and you've got to be able to beat them there, because if you let them, Hanbury, Parker, Kennedy, Jack, those guys sort of push you around in the middle and win the footy, they're going to sort of control the game how they want to.
You're in for a long day.
And if they're doing that, there's every chance that they're giving Buddy some pretty good opportunities. And he's the type of player we don't want really to be having any good opportunities. So,
well, we don't know how Buddy's going to go down at Kardinia Park because it's his first trip there, apparently.
No, I think I got someone that he played there in his first year or so, didn't he? When Hawthorn used to still travel.
Oh, really? Okay, I missed that. My bad.
But he might have been. He might not have been playing. I can't remember. But there was when he's been in the Hawthorn squad, they've played at Geelong. The key with him is, I know people will say Lonergan will get him. If it depends on how Buddy plays, as in how he approaches the game, because Lonergan did beat him many a time the last few years at Hawthorn, but for some stupid reason, because for some stupid reason Buddy used to just stand there and try to wrestle him.
Right.
And that's playing more to Lonergan's strength, where he can grapple, and this is just my take on it, obviously. But if Buddy actually got on his bike and ran around, then he would smash. Dom's in for a world of trouble if Buddy does that.
Was on that one.
So I'm hoping that Buddy decides that he needs to wrestle for the game. He's my biggest worry, really, as well as winning the ball at the coalface. Buddy's the biggest concern, because if he gets his tail up, he can turn nothing chances into goals.
Well, I think his opportunities obviously stem from what the Sydney midfield is doing as well. And like you said, if you let them get it out quick and he looks up, or they look up and see him moving forward, and Domsy half a step behind, it's going to be a long day. Yep. So that directly relates back to making sure that, the mids are not giving them free ball and let them get out easy and quick.
Yep, absolutely. Pivo? Apart from kicking straight.
Yeah, there was a dynamite drop in. Look, just looking at the team, Franklin seems to be their main avenue. Yeah. I mean, they're sort of, obviously they probably won't line up the way that they've been named, but they're pretty small, and you sort of think Franklin's going to be the main guy, which might potentially make him pretty predictable. So you wonder whether your Enrights and Jackies and so forth might just sweat off the men a little bit and sort of give a bit of a chop out and help out guys like Taylor. I guess if he starts at centre half forward, you would think Taylor might get him. If he goes to full forward, obviously Lonergan will get him. But when it's all said and done, I actually reckon Henderson's the guy that should go to him.
Was just wondering whether they were going to try something like that, whether Henderson would get a shot at him to start with, just to make things different. Because, like you said, Willo, Buddy, and Domsy have kind of been a regular sparring partners over the years. Maybe just change it up a little bit and see how that goes.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily matters who's on him, because if he's on, there's not a player that can stop him anyway. So it's about almost minimising the damage then and try and cut the ball off at the source so that it doesn't, cut the supply off. So
if we think it's been just changing tack a little bit, if we think it's been a heavy ground, do you think the Swans game against the Doggies, that was a fairly intense game, and if it is a bit heavy underfoot, maybe that'll come into play later on? A bit of fatigue setting in.
Well, they do have the 6-day break as well. After a tough game, 6-day break and travelling interstate, while we've had 2 weeks off to think about what we've done, basically. So sit in the naughty corner and think about what we've done. So I don't know. Once the draw comes out, they plan for every day almost for the year's already planned for them and their recovery and everything like that. But I'm certainly happier that we should have the fresher side, and we've been finishing off games well in the last quarter anyway. But if it's tight come 3/4 time, we should be reasonably comfortable or back our ability in to run over them.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, I think so. They're a top 8 side. They haven't had a huge amount of success down at Geelong, so it all, in theory, bodes pretty well for us to get over the top of them.
Absolutely. Now we've got a few other issues that we wanted to touch on this week's show as well. And in our planning, the way we were going to discuss them and the headlines and the titles for them were beautifully put by Pivo. So I'm stealing your work here, mate, as we introduce our next sort of topics. Firstly, Stephen Motlop. Misunderstood genius or lazy prick? Where do we stand on Mr. Motlop and how he's going at the moment? Oh, Pivo, you wrote the headline, so I'll let you start with this one.
Ooh, yay! I'll probably sit on the fence a little bit here. He is one of the most maddening players I've had the misfortune to love. I think he some of the things he does, you just you shake your head at, and you just go, my God, there will be like maybe 5 or 6 players that can actually do that. And then on the other hand, you shake your head and go, oh, he's done a Motlop. Some of his best games this year have been standout. I don't think there's too much doubt about that. But then when he puts in a shocker, they really are a shocker.
Yeah.
And they've been in the losses. I mean, so is he almost like a true barometer of the side? Because I'm pretty sure all his really bad games have been in games we've lost.
Does it also maybe show his value to the team that when he is up and about, which obviously proves the barometer the theory, but when he's up and about and playing well, that we're obviously a much better team as well, which is, I think, is probably a no-brainer. It's obviously a guess, but
it's the consistency, I think, is or lack of it, that makes it so frustrating, because you look at him and go, there was a period there where I was calling him centimetres Motlop. It's like he's centimetres away from pulling off something brilliant, and if he gets it done, everyone's like, how good is Mots? And then, the flip side of that is he misses something or does something silly and misses it by a little bit, ball turned over, goes back the other way, they kick a goal, you sit there and go, Mots, what the hell are you doing?
And handball to Hawkins.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, when he's not going well and things aren't working for him, and he tries to stiff arm his way out of tackles, Mott's is many things, but delivering stiff arms is not something that I think he should really be doing. Jake Stringer, when we played him, delivered 2 stiff arms and pushed off and got a great clearance on a boundary, I think, that Edda had, and was off and running. And it was just like, that's how you do it, Motts. You shouldn't be trying to deliver stiff arms. Caddy and those guys can do it. Something when it's not happening for him and he's trying to throw stiff arms, it just spirals out of control in a downward fashion.
I think he needs a stiff upper lip other than a stiff arm.
I think he's do
you guys reckon he gets the sooks every now and then?
Oh, he drops the bottom lip.
Yeah, the toys come out of the pram a couple of times, I reckon. Yeah. I want to say he and Guthrie got into it a little bit. There was a post that noted some angst, or at least
it was from I believe that was from Jester.
Yeah. An exchange between Guthrie and Motts on the boundary when Motts kind of started pushing and shoving with one of the Dogs players, I think. I can't remember who it was. And Guthrie kind of came over and just gave him a bit of a look and said something. I don't know what was said, but it didn't come across as, hey, Motts, that was great.
I get infuriated with him because his best is so good and his worst is so bad. And you know what he's capable of that's so good. But I think I don't want to say he's mentally weak, but I think he lets things get to him a bit more than he probably should, or easier than he should, if that's the right term. Like he seems that when people push and shove him and get into him and scrag him and tackle him a bit, he sort of lets it get to him a bit too much and just he either loses his focus and just wants to push and shove and fight, or he just sort of sulks off and skirts around the outside and doesn't actually do anything, just sort of runs around in circles for the game. So I think I don't know if it's just an attitude thing or if it's just a bit of his personality. I'm not sure what it is, but he's obviously a confidence player as well, and when he's up and about, he looks like he can walk on water, basically, the way he plays. Like Pivo, you said that he does stuff where you look at it and you go, there's only about 5 players in the league that could do that, and he makes it look ridiculously easy. And then, but if it's not working for him, he looks like he'd struggle to get a kick in the, Leopold reserves. So, and that's why he's such a polarising player.
Should he have been dropped?
Nah, I don't know that. I don't know you can take the potential exposed form as how good he can be. I don't know that you can just, after some plateauing games, to be nice. I don't know that he's ready to go back to the VFL yet. I think getting away for the bye, clearing his head, coming back. If he doesn't show up again this week, I think it's going to be harder to not send him back. But I don't think this was the game and the environment to send him back this week.
It's interesting, though. I don't think that he's beyond or above getting dropped in the eyes of the coaching staff at the moment. I don't think if you sort of... I can't remember where I heard it or I followed it, but I think it was on SEN or I heard somewhere that Chris Scott hasn't been happy with his last few weeks, and has clearly stated that. So it's he'd want to play well tomorrow, or he might, if he has sort of a repeat of the game against St Kilda. I wouldn't be surprised if he was sent back for a week, to put it that way. I'm not sure if he's... I mean, his form, sort of his first 3 rounds this year were pretty average, and then he hit
He got on his
all
bike.
Australian form for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then Carlton his drop-off started when we lost those 2 games with Collingwood and Carlton, I think, and he sort of just hasn't really gotten back into it since then.
Well, I think teams might have realised that if you do put a bit of work into him, like Carlton did, that it doesn't necessarily react to it well. And, I think that they've kind of gone, let's stick with this theory. And it's so far it's been working. So it's definitely up to him to get back get his mojo back, so to speak. And that's why I think they kind of let him go this week and say, okay, you've had a break. You've had a chance to get away, come back in, and turn it on from the first bounce.
Yep. And now,
I mean, if you want some sort of damning comments from sort of, I guess, outside the bubble a little bit, you go to that great bastion of SEN Inside Football, and they sat there and said, the description in the Collingwood game, he played 1 goal from 3 effective disposals in the first half and ended with 5 for the game. Yeah. Horrid day. Carlton, Blues attacked him physically and he couldn't handle it. Only cat not to lay a tackle. Yeah. And the not laying a tackle was pretty damning as well, because I remember last year, I think it was early on, there was a lot of discussion about Motlop almost being like a downhill skier. And there was arguments saying about, but his pressure acts are up. He's doing the work, but he's just not getting the disposals. And, I was sort of like, well, I think for me, I'd rather the ball in Motlop's hand rather than him chasing around trying to lay tackles. But when you have a guy and he doesn't even lay a tackle, how's his work rate type thing? And is that indicative of what happens when, if things aren't going his way, the whole effort just drops right away?
It's a frustrating one. I dare say, average Joe public, we can say what we think, but the work rate issue would be answered by the little GPS that he's got in his jumper. And I dare say that the match committee and the coaching staff are looking, and if they're seeing no tackles, but they're seeing, 18k ran and just runs, high intensity running from 50 to 50, and in the footage they see him, making contests and just not getting there. They're probably a bit more forgiving of it, but if he's just sort of plodding around, and this is obviously all the data that we don't have any access to, any insight into, but you'd imagine that in the position of a player like this, they'd also be looking at every little thing, including, his readings for that type of stuff, just to see if they think he is working hard, just in his unrewarded running, as they say, as well.
I've given Mott's, on the board when he's been down, I've given him a shellacking. I don't get to see, obviously, outside the screen because I'm geographically challenged. But there was one instance, and I want to say it was either the St Kilda game, maybe the week before, but the opposition were carrying the ball down wing, and you could see the camera shot, and it was basically across the centre. And in the foreground, slightly out of focus, you could see Stephen Motlop walking through the middle or really slowly jogging through the middle as the ball's being carried by the opposition down the wing. And it's like, well, it's cherry picking, obviously, but if you're really in a defensive mindset and you're really putting in effort, get your ass down and help your defenders out. Get an extra body down there as that ball's getting down there. I know there's defensive structures and there's positioning. You don't want to get sucked too far down and all that sort of stuff, but it just wasn't a good look. Is the point I was getting at. So again, I don't get to see the stuff live, so I can't see what else he's doing out of the screenshot, but it just, on that one particular thing, didn't look good.
Yep.
In terms of reflection of work rate, anyway.
And whilst we are on the topic of, underperforming players or players that are potentially in the gun or being questioned, it would be, we have to basically cover the topic of Nathan Vardy. As Pivo put it, is he looking for love in all the wrong places? And obviously referring to the rumours, talk, recent newspaper articles that there's a few teams inquiring on his services, that he's apparently not happy with his opportunities or lack of. And one of the teams mentioned was GWS, Pivo, you said, I think. And
amongst a couple.
As interested in him, which we sort of think is probably the worst possible fit. We can't see any way that he fits into GWS, considering they've probably got about 15 key position forwards that are all first round draft picks. So, I suppose I've seen Vards a couple of times just in the twos, and he's been seriously underwhelming. If he's unhappy about the lack of senior opportunities, he probably needs to have a look at the fact that he hasn't been playing any good, and sort of the buck stops with him in that sense. But I suppose Daz, what's your take on the Nathan Vardy situation? Where do you see it?
I think he's in. I mean, it's all up to him at this point, but I think he could be in a bit of trouble because if you look at, what is he, 24, 25 now?
Yeah, maybe about that.
25.
And, 25, 24 on the list for 6 or 7 years. I think a certain amount of latitude has to be given for recovering from the ACL, and I know it's a 2014 issue, but it does seem to do, or 2015, whenever it was, it takes people, it seems to take people the season after they do the ACL, then they come back, and that whole year that they're back is a bit of a write-off. They just don't seem to come back quickly or well from ACLs. Smith had the same problem. He came back after he popped ears and didn't do much and found himself wandering around the kneeful, which worked out well for us. But I think there's a condition there. But form-wise, he's just got to pull the finger out and get more. Going back to my thinking, he's in trouble. Tom Reed on our list. I've seen him play a couple of times in the VFL. 200 centimetres, 5 years younger than Vard, so a lot more time left in him. Mobile guy, in my opinion, better hands marking than Vardy. Vard seems to need glasses sometimes because he just doesn't grab things first plunk. I think there's a bit of internal pressure coming on him, and he's feeling it. Lucy's, again, a long way off talent-wise, but again seems to be doing better in some VFL games late than what Vardy's doing, and Vardy, with the pedigree and experience, should be doing better.
Pivo, what's your take on Mr. Vardy?
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of Vards. I'm not sure why I should be a big fan of him, but I am a big fan of him. But he's one of those guys that you watch him, and I just wonder sometimes whether myself and maybe other people who are of the same thinking have been sucked in by how he looks as opposed to what he does. I mean, he just looks like he should be a great footballer. Seems to have all the attributes. When he's moving, he moves well. He seems to fly for the ball. He's not a bad kick. But
Luke Darcy,
you then go back and
massive rap for him.
Oh, well, maybe that's the death knell then. But you then go back and look at the stats, and he doesn't really do much. As we've got guys on the board who have pointed this out, and they sort of get smacked down a little bit. But I mean, the stats are there. They're there for people to read, and it's not like they really are moving or trending upwards at a great rate of knots. He sort of hovers around that 10 touches a game, and maybe 17 or 20 hit-outs, type thing. But when you look at him, you think, man, this guy could seriously when everything clicks, and if he can get a free run at it, he could seriously just tear a game apart. But is he ever going to actually tear a game apart?
Well, you look at is it Tom Lynch for Gold Coast? I mean, he's a big bloke, mobile, plays as a great forward, does a little bit of ruck work here and there. Is young, 21, whatever. But I think there's dimensions-wise, he and Vardy are kind of similar sizes. And it's like, well, Lynchwood, I think, was a first-round pick, or a much higher pick than what Vardy was. But it's like, this is what you could be, this is what you are. Can you bridge the gap between the two? And it's kind of frustrating to see sometimes that he doesn't get there or close to it.
I mean, is the issue really the fact that he's had so many injuries, and he had the hip, he had the knee, that he's never really going to be the player that we perhaps hoped and expected he's going to be? Or is
distinctly possible?
Is what we're seeing pretty much, is that it? Regardless of the injuries, that's it. That's the kind of guy he is. He struggles to, is it just me, or does he seem to struggle to hold his grabs? He seems to fly for the ball pretty impressively, but he doesn't really seem to bring the ball to, down that well. I don't know. He's another one of those sort of maddening players for me, because I'm a massive fan of him, and you sort of see little bits of glimpses here and there of what he does, but then he goes off and his form in the VFL by all accounts has been putrid. The one game I saw, which was on telly, he looked ordinary, and I was sort of left thinking, is this the same guy? Did I completely misread the way he is?
And it's not like he hasn't. If he is sort of annoyed at lack of opportunity and stuff, at the same time, it's though they don't want to pick him. Some players you sort of just think no matter how good they're going to be, they just don't push their way in, they don't get picked. Vardy's been given plenty of games where he probably hasn't warranted it. And the fact that Clark's come back, played 4 games, and they've brought him in, and probably, ideally, he's playing the role that they would have liked Vardy to take and to step up and take. And Vardy's had the first half of the year playing pretty much every week. I know there was talk, he had a foot injury at the start of the year and stuff, but he only missed 1 or 2 games. And he came off a full pre-season, so he's still basically has been playing pretty much every week in the twos, and he hasn't grasped the opportunity. So I'm starting to wonder if maybe he just isn't good enough.
Well, I mean, I don't think it helps too when you got, was it Tim House was playing in the VFL? Was it 23rd player or something like that, came in and was on the one VFL game that I saw that was online, was clunking everything. I mean, he took like 5 or 6 pack marks and was kicking goals and stuff like that. And it's like, well, who's this bloke coming in? But we can't get Vardy. Vardy should be making him look bad, and it was the other way around. You know what I mean? He didn't seem to be taking his opportunities, and I'm not sure if the bottom lips hit the ground a little bit, and he's kind of lost motivation. Or again, I'm looking at all this from far, far away, so it's hard for me to tell. You blokes that have a better angle on it than me, but I don't know. It's just missing at the moment. He needs to get on his bike, because the sand's going through the hourglass pretty quick, I think.
That's a pretty...
Just quickly on it, and I just want to correct myself a little bit, because I probably oversold his ruck work a little bit by saying he had about 20 hit-outs a game when it's actually down around 11. But when I was comparing, I was just looking at the stats, and I know probably the three of us aren't massive stats guys, but I mean, Nathan Vardy and Reece Stanley to me seem to be a pretty good comparison to sort of work against. I mean, they're both
Sure.
about the same age, both about the same height, both about the same weight. Obviously Stanley's played a lot more games than Vardy has, but I mean, if you were sort of just without looking at anything, and who would you say Reece Stanley has sort of improved and is looking good, and you're pretty happy with where he's at, and you like what he's bringing to the table for us? If you think that way, I mean, Stanley over his career, his average disposals are 10, Vardy's at 8. Marks, he doubles the marks, which kind of falls in with what we think with Vardy, that he doesn't seem to be able to grab the ball as well as he can. But Vardy lays more tackles. Vardy has more hit-outs. It's you sort of look at it and you go, gee, they actually stack up pretty well. And yet you've got Stanley, which people this season are saying, hey, he was a good pickup and he's doing pretty well. And Vardy's rubbish. And yet, career-wise, even though one's played a lot less games than the other, there's not a huge amount between them. I mean, they were even picked in the 40s when they were drafted originally.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of sitting here taking that in going...
But I suppose it's more about what Vardy's doing at the moment. And...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got almost like the stats, and then you've got the eye test. And the eye test says to you, Stanley's doing all right, and he's sort of projecting upwards.
Yep.
Vardy just looks terrible.
Yeah. I thought Stanley's game against St Kilda was reasonable. I didn't think it was... wasn't his best game, but it certainly wasn't his worst.
I thought he was good. He took a couple of big, strong marks. He had 19 or 20, 19 touches.
Yeah.
I only know that because I read that somewhere before, because someone on my Twitter was questioning, saying he was very stiff to be dropped. And
that was your research.
He was pretty ordinary against North and the Bulldogs, though.
Yeah. He's... he was very ordinary against North. The bugger, he cost me the title in the knockout goal kicking comp. So, dirty on him for that. So...
See, these are the big issues.
Yeah, it's the important stuff. But I agree, I went to that North game and he was bloody hopeless. Tarrant absolutely smashed him. Stanley was having such a dirty night that night that if he'd run into the goal square in an open goal, he would have missed the ball. Like, that's just how bad he was going. So,
you mean like Motts and Menzel did?
Yeah, so it's just...
Just on Motts' defence there, that wasn't Motts' fault.
No, well, it was all of their fault. Motts shouldn't have called for it. Menzel shouldn't have handballed it.
Yeah, I'm in the camp of, I think Menz was trying to do Motts a solid by giving him a cheapie and getting him some confidence and getting him into the game, and it just fell apart horrendously.
But you shouldn't. If one of your if one of your main forwards marks the ball 20 out, you don't run past calling for a cheap handball. You just let them go back and kick the goal, because they're going to be having more shots at it than you anyway. So you want them getting their confidence up and feeling good about themselves and kicking lots of goals.
Agreed.
Exactly.
Anyway, we've gone well over time. For what I...
Well, just quickly on it though, and I know you want to wrap it up, but with Vardy though, if we are to trade him out, what do we think he's worth?
Oh, couldn't be much.
There's such a wide and varied opinion.
As I read somewhere, someone saying Walker, we got a third round pick for Walker basically, and he was playing senior footy at the time. So if Vardy doesn't get into the senior team this year, we don't really have a position to make any demands on trades, do we?
Well, I think he's out of contract too.
He's out of contract, and if clubs knowing that, and if Essendon want him, for example, Essendon won't even do anything. Essendon will offer us their last pick, and if we don't take it, they'll pick him up in the pre-season draft. So, if they want him, for example, we've got no leverage, which seems to be a common theme when players want to leave us, but we've got no real leverage. If he's not playing senior footy, we've got even less to try and demand anything. So I wouldn't think we'd get much, which is a bit of a, if nothing else, it's a waste on an investment in all the years and time that he's had. But at the same time, you look at a player like Cowan, who's probably in the same boat, probably done at the end of this year. After
if he doesn't get in there, yeah. If he gets hurt again, it's done. and I've been a Cowan fan for a while, but I'm at the call at the start of the year. It's like it's this year or nothing, and so far it's sadly been nothing. So I think it's going to be curtains at the end of the year for him.
Yeah. So I mean, if they don't get in the senior team, how can you turn around and demand a good pick or something from the team that on a player that you haven't even played in your top side?
You can't.
I don't think we've got much to sort of. I don't think if we get anything half decent, we'd be probably pretty happy.
Yeah,
I think we're pretty much trying to trade him on potential at the moment.
The danger is Mitch Clark and what happens with him.
The downside of that is, I like exactly where you're going, Willow.
If Clark stays fit, and burns this half of the year, and he's in a good headspace, he's got twins on the way that are only about 10 weeks away or so, everything's rolling nicely for him. We could get a few years out of him, and he could be fine whilst another one underneath this is developing. But if Clark pops a muscle again in the next 4 weeks, and then something happens to Vardy or Vardy's cracked the Saz, by then all of a sudden we're in a pretty difficult spot with not much else below apart from, Hawk, the sole man down there. And then, there's other options. You can always look at playing Stanley as a centre-half forward and developing your other ruckman and things like that, but it certainly puts us in a lot worse position than we are currently in, and one we don't really want to be in.
Not an enviable position when you're literally one muscle tweak away from, I don't want to say Armageddon, but being in a very, very, very unhappy place.
Yeah, and it's the unreliability that both of those players have had in the last few years that gives probably everyone no confidence in what's going to happen. You're sort of just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
Yeah, it's going to be... seeing how Clark goes, it's going to be very, very interesting to watch.
All right, boys, that will probably do us, because I've ran a bit over time of what I was planning. And we didn't even get to all the topics. We were going to talk about something else that we didn't even get to. That's right, we'll save it for next time. Lastly, before I go, just one final thing. If you've got a tip or any thoughts or anything you're looking forward to seeing tomorrow, Daz?
Us by probably 2 goals.
Yep. Pivo?
I reckon 2 or 3 for us. I'm really looking forward to seeing Mitch Clark get out there as well. I am a big Mitch Clark fan, so I'm hoping he plays pretty well, and he doesn't. There's no problems or anything like that. He gets through the game without any problems, and jags a couple, and he's moving well. So I'm looking forward to seeing him.
Yep. I'm the same. I think obviously Mitch Clark will be great to see. Hopefully, it'd be nice if he gets an early touch or an early goal, even if it is someone gifting one off.
Sure.
Not from 20 metres out, but if someone looks after him, basically, much like how they did against Hawthorn last year, I reckon it'd be pretty good if he gets an early goal. The crowd will really get going, and you'll see 18 Geelong players run down and get around him, which should be good to see.
Apparently it's a sellout too.
I believe so. I've been sent, I think, 3 emails and about 2 or 3 text messages just by the club, just making sure that I know I can sell my seat if I don't want to go. So I assume there's a bit of a squeeze on for seats. I actually reckon I'm surprised if we win by about 5 goals. We just seem to have a habit of it at Geelong, of it making it a bit more comfortable than you'd sort of expect. Like that game against GWS, if we'd kicked straight, we would have belted them. So, and I don't really feel like sitting there in a tense, tough game. I want to enjoy it, and hopefully we win comfortably. So that's my tip, obviously with a fair bit of hope in that tip.
Don't the Swannies have a bit of a publicity thing going on at the moment? I'm not into the old, stuff that happens off the field. I don't
Oh, there's some issue with Kieran Jack.
Kieran Jack and something.
I haven't been following it at all, so
I'm not across it. I don't like giving airtime to all that kind of rubbish, but they might be either a little distracted or extremely focused as a result of it.
It is his 200th game as well tomorrow.
Great.
And he's a good little player, so I know we're meant to hate Sydney because of the whole Kohler stuff, but I actually like a lot of the Sydney players and don't mind them as a team. I like the way they play. I like the way I like the style of footy in a sense of just the contested, hard brand of footy they play. And outside, I never thought I'd say it because I hated him when he was at Hawthorn, but Buddy Franklin is probably the most watchable player in the comp at the moment, or this year anyway. Probably has been for the last few years, but apart from our Geelong players, of course. But so I actually don't mind Sydney, but I hope they're rubbish tomorrow night.
See, because he doesn't play for the Hawks anymore, you're able to get away with saying that about Franklin.
I can admit it. We are allowed to admit it. I hated him at Hawthorn, no matter what he did, because I didn't even take it in properly. But I can appreciate him for actually being a gun that he is at Sydney.
Yeah, fair talent.
I mean, Hanbury, Parker. I mean, Luke Parker is just he's great to watch.
Yep.
And we potentially get to see that quick little redhead that's being linked to us as well now.
That's right. So, that might be another topic for another show, though. We'll do a show in a week or two, and we'll review how he went against us.
Especially if he stinks it up.
Yeah, or if he burns. Imagine the excitement if he has a good game, though.
Oh, look out.
And Murdoch stinks it up.
So basically what we'll hope for is a Cats win and Rowan to kick 5.
Yeah. Yes, that's it.
Sensational.
All right. Thank you very much for, getting up, staying up, talking with us, Daz. Thank you again very much for coming on.
Absolutely.
What time
Pleasure
is it
as
now?
always.
late. Well, you don't even have to go back to bed now.
Yeah, at 5:30.
Oh, you can go for that run. You can go for that run you were telling us about.
Yeah, might just go for another one.
Beautiful, good work, mate. And Pivo, thank you very much for joining us. Finally,
No problems. I'll assume the check's in the mail.
Yeah, no worries. If it's not there, it's obviously just been lost. But we'll chase it up with Chief. He's the one that dishes those out.
He'll be thrilled to hear you say that.
No, it was good fun.
All right, no worries. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I've got no idea when the next show will be, so we'll get to it when we get to it. All the best, everyone. Hope everyone enjoys tomorrow. Hope we have a win. Go Cats.
Go Cats.
Cheers.